Okay, well, hello, folks, and welcome to another Blab with Big Owls. Today, we're going to be talking about keeping SPS corals colored up, growing, looking good, using LED lighting, which has been a hot topic. Lots of people have questions about LED still. Although LED's been out for a number of years now, we're probably coming up on about 5 years where we've seen it coming into the hobby. It's still fairly new. A lot of people have a lot of questions regarding it, and there's like a dizzying array of LED options out there for you. So today we wanted to talk with EcoTech Marine and get their take on LED lighting for SPS corals or just corals in general, and basically touch on the different points that people have questions and concerns about. Things, for instance, like what is par or per or lux, and what role do they play when looking at LED fixtures? What kind of colors of LEDs are appropriate for corals? How much strength in a fixture or LED lighting you're looking for, like what's best, what's overkill, what's not enough. Those are the kinds of things we want to touch on. Here we go. We got Chris coming up.
Hey, Thomas, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. How's it going, Chris?
Good, thanks. Hey, just a quick question on the LEDs. Are LEDs better than metal halide T5 HO lights?
That's actually often debated. So LEDs are fantastic for a number of reasons. And one of the biggest draws for LED over other lighting technologies is that they're basically giving you a lot more light output for less power consumption. So you've got less wattage being used up. So it's going to be cheaper on your electric bill, but you're still putting out a lot of light for those corals, which is really important. So in that regard, yes, LEDs are better. However, LEDs are a little bit trickier to use than something like high output T5s or metal halide, which have been in the hobby for a number of years. So a benefit of T5s over LED, for instance, is that T5 bulbs give you a really nice kind of even blanket of light across the entire aquarium with no real hot spots to speak of. So no matter where you stick a coral in a tank with adequate T5 lighting, it's going to be more or less the right spot for that coral. It's not going to be under a hot spot, which is what LEDs have a habit of doing, where you've got, a section of the aquarium that's got a ton of light, and then you move off to the side and you've got a lot less. So depending on your, I guess, experience in the hobby is a good way to put it. LEDs are fantastic, but they do require a little bit of extra knowledge, whereas T5s are a lot easier for the average user to get on board with. When it comes to metal halides, again, fantastic lighting option. The biggest issue with halides is that they have a ton of heat output, so they heat up the tank, and a lot of the time that means you got to get a chiller or something to keep the temperature down so you don't bake your corals. And they have a massive power consumption by comparison. So, you could be using 70 watts of LED, and that'll be equivalent to 250 watts of metal halide. So it's a big difference on the electrical bill at the end of the day.
Great. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, no problem, Chris. So while we wait for EcoTech to jump on board here, I'm going to go over a little bit of my history in the hobby and in lighting specifically for SPS corals. When I started keeping corals, basically the technology of the day at that point was metal halide. It was metal halide and VHO fluorescent lighting, which are really big, thick fluorescent lighting tubes that are basically ramped up to have a lot more output than a standard fluorescent. And back then, these technologies were all you needed to keep corals healthy long-term, but at a cost, because back then you're dealing with a lot of wattage to try to push that amount of light out of a bulb that basically doesn't put out a ton of light for the power consumption it's using. So the efficiency wasn't there, but the lighting was there. So we could keep those corals, keep them happy and healthy. It was a lot different because you'd have less options in terms of color. You'd be struggling to find different types of actinic lights. You basically have your basic 10K bulbs, your actinic bulbs. If you're lucky, you could find a 50-50 VHO, and they had something back in the day also called trichromatic bulbs, which was trying to give you a broad spectrum in a single bulb. And they did okay, and people had success with corals, and corals would grow for you, but they never quite had that punch in color that they have today that we're seeing in this day and age. Metal halides was a step up from VHO, where you'd have a higher power consumption. You'd have a point source light instead of a fluorescent, which is giving you that nice even blanket of light. But you had so much more punch that corals that required a lot more light in order to grow or in order to bring out that color you'd be looking for in a coral, you have that ability with metal halides. So we'd see more and more people getting into hard corals, stony corals, namely SPS corals like Acropora, Montipora, Stylophora, things like that. And they were having more and more success with it. And as metal halide became more mainstream, we went from having bulbs that were pretty yellow. The first bulbs we really saw coming out were in the 6,500 Kelvin range, which people think is great for plants. But these days, when we talk about coral, that's extremely red. It's really far into the yellow-red side of things. So we started seeing more and more shifting towards a white or a cool white bulb. So that's when we started to get our 10K bulbs. And the 10K bulbs were great. They were fantastic. But we still found ourselves in this position where it wasn't giving off the kind of fluorescence we thought we could get out of corals. So then people would supplement their metal halide bulbs with VHO fluorescent bulbs that are actinic. So we'd have a 10K halide, and then you got some fluorescent actinics, and that was really pleasing to the eye. A lot of people would stagger it. So you'd have your fluorescence come on first for a couple of hours, and then your metal halide would be the midpoint in the day, kind of simulating high noon and giving that extra punch of light. Then that halide would go off, and you'd leave the VHOs on for a little bit longer, and then it would all turn off. And that was really when we started to see that transition to the sunrise sunset. And that's kind of where that started. So now we've reached this point where we're getting more fluorescence out of our corals, and we're able to grow corals faster and get natural looking colonies in aquariums that have this gorgeous shimmer effect because of the metal halide. But we're still really heating the tanks up because of all the heat output from the metal halides and the VHOs. And we're also eating away at our electrical bill like crazy, because now we've got, in some cases, for like a 90-gallon tank, you could have somewhere between 800 to 1,200 watts of lighting just sucking your electrical bill dry. So moving forward from that, we started to see a shift into power compacts. So power compacts are basically a fluorescent bulb that's almost been bent in half into a U shape so that all the connections are at one end. You'd have 4 pins at one end and a nice big U. And what that did is it allowed you to stick more fluorescent power in a smaller footprint. Power compacts did a pretty good job, considering they became very popular very quickly. But again, we were finding that we were lacking the punch of halides. So then we started seeing fixtures that had power compact bulbs and metal halides built into them, because people keeping SPS corals specifically still found that compact fluorescents on their own just weren't cutting it. From that point, it started to push further into an array, or having a broader array of metal halide bulbs. So this is where, somewhere in this section is where we started to see metal halides in the 14,000 Kelvin range, or the 15,000 Kelvin. There was 20,000 Kelvin halides at one point. Radium became a very well-known brand of metal halide bulb. It was extremely blue when you looked at it, which made the tank look a little bit dimmer than if you were using something like a 10,000 Kelvin metal halide. But what it did do is it really made the corals fluoresce. So rather than having to run VHOs, power compacts, and a metal halide, we saw more people running just the metal halide using a radium bulb to help pull in those blue colors, or blue spectrum for the colors for the SPS that we'd like to see. So, you've got that blue spectrum causing fluorescence and influencing the corals to give off a little bit more fluorescent pigment. So, that's when our tanks started to get really colorful, and you'd see really well done SPS rich tanks that have bright pinks, bright yellows, bright reds. This is really when we started to see more and more SPS start to get fancy names. So these days we see SPS like Reef Raft Jaw Dropper, or Wolverine, or Strawberry Shortcake, or like Yellow Caroliniana, or something like that. These really crazy brightly colored acros. When those halide bulbs started to become more popular, we started to see more and more coloration from our corals. And this is really what started to push us in that direction of paying more attention to the blue spectrum, which is a good thing because corals actually photosynthesize best using the blue end of the spectrum. The reason that is because water filters out red light very quickly. So the algae that are housed inside of the coral tissue have really spent most of their energy through evolution in learning how to pull in that useful blue spectrum that actually makes it through the water, rather than trying to grasp at straws with the red spectrum that only really makes it in the first few feet of the water. So once we've pushed a little bit further ahead, now we've got tons of really beautiful tanks, but we're still struggling with basically consumption. And shortly thereafter, we started to see a breakout in T5 fluorescents. So T5s had already hit the scene a while back, but they were in a normal output version and they weren't that useful. At this point, we started to see other companies bring out high output T5s. So bulbs that are producing a lot more light, smaller diameter, so you can pack more T5 fluorescents in a hood than you could something like a VHO T12. You'd have less power consumption with a higher light output. That also means that you've got less heat output coming out of that fixture to warm up your tank. So people who were previously really married to the idea of using metal halides were now trying T5 fluorescents and using multiple bulbs. So instead of having a fixture that might only hold 2 VHO bulbs that are T12s that have like a consumption of, let's say, somewhere around 220 watts, now we're seeing the 200 watts going across 4 different bulbs in a similar T5 high output fixture. And although the wattage was the same, the bulbs were more efficient, so they produced less heat. They were a lot skinnier, which means a reflector sitting behind the bulb is able to push more light around the bulb because the bulb's not in the way. And with more bulbs in the fixture, there is more mixing and matching going on of bulb spectrums. And T5 bulbs, companies really paid attention to this and saw that, with metal halides, people wanted different types of halides and different types of colors. So they did the same thing with T5s. Now we've got T5s in a 10,000K color, 14,000K color, a special mix of roseate and actinic, different types of actinics, 420, 440 nanometer actinics. And people could mix and match these different color combinations of bulbs in a single fixture, allowing them to provide a very custom spectrum to their corals and really focus on what they thought was best for their corals in terms of growth and coloration. So at this point, we've got a T5 fixture, a new type of fixture, less heat output, more energy efficient, more customization in terms of what kind of light we're going to be able to produce with that fixture. And people had a lot of fun with that. And we started to see more and more and more customization and more SPS specific tanks really thriving and really throwing out beautiful colored corals. I see a question here from Reptifin. Reef Jesus, how many blue versus white LEDs should there be in a good fixture? That's a good question. Really, just touching back on what I said about blue spectrum being the most important, people are going to have different stances on this. However, I will say that unless the white LEDs are tuned to be high in the blue end of the spectrum, like a 10,000K white LED or some sort of custom LED that's going to be pushing more towards that side, you want more actinic LEDs than anything. And the reason you do is because the photosynthesis is in the blue spectrum. So if you have a lot of white and not a lot of blue, your corals aren't going to be able to use most of that light. Whereas if you have a lot more blue LEDs, that's really what's going to help your corals grow and fluoresce, and you're going to get the most out of your tank using that. For a fixture, some people like 50-50, so you have, half the LEDs in the blue spectrum, half in the white. I think it's a lot more appropriate to be somewhere between 70-30 or 75-25. So the majority of the bulbs should be blue, and that'll really help get you where you want to be with your fixture and with your corals. Right on. So moving back to where we were talking about the history of lighting moving into LED. Shortly after the whole T5 era had really kicked off, and we're still seeing a lot of tanks running T5. They're still extremely relevant, and it's, in my opinion, it's kind of like easy mode because LEDs can be tough, which we'll touch on in a bit. That's when we started to see the first LED fixtures coming out. This is probably in the last 5 years or so. And when they started coming out, the idea of what the exact spectrum of LEDs should be was debated. The amount of white versus blue LEDs was debated. Which types of LEDs they should use was on the fence as well, because there weren't a lot of companies making these really nice custom LED chips in custom spectrums specifically for this hobby. That came probably within the last 3 to 4 years, really started to ramp up. So when we first started seeing LED fixtures, one of the first ones I can remember was by a company called PFO, which unfortunately is no longer in existence as far as I'm aware. They had a very big, very bulky, very expensive LED fixture that did grow coral and did a pretty good job at doing it. But it was really way out of the price range for the average hobbyist. Most people would look at that fixture and just turn away from it for a number of reasons. The price was probably the most deterring factor. Even a small fixture was around $2,000 at that time. The largest fixtures were somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000. And we're not talking massive. We're talking 4-foot fixture, 6-foot fixture tops for those sizes of aquariums. And because LED hadn't really been on the scene very long, we didn't have a lot of solid proof of how well they were going to grow coral. So a lot of the people using those fixtures were doing so kind of hoping for the best. And they did, like I said, they did do a pretty decent job, but there were issues with those fixtures, which we're seeing now with today's LED fixtures are really going to be a non-issue soon because, well, in a lot of cases are a non-issue already. Using inappropriate lenses that are making the beams much too tight so that you're burning corals with like laser beams of light instead of having a nice even blanket. Optics have come a long way for LED since then, which has really helped out with this. So that's kind of the history of reef lighting in a nutshell and how we transitioned into the realm of LEDs. Pendants better than strips. Oh, sorry about that, Melinda. I apologize. Pendants and strips. So in my experience and from what I've seen, pendants better than strips is kind of a funny question because it really applies to what you want out of your tank and how your tank's set up. If you've got a long tank, like a 55 gallon that isn't too wide, sometimes strips work a lot better just for getting an even light distribution across the entire tank, front to back and side to side. Getting a strip, you just have to pay attention because a lot of strips are kind of underpowered for SPS. However, there are strips out there that have more than enough juice to keep your SPS growing, colored, and happy. A good recommendation would be looking at Current USA. They have the Orbit Marine Pro, I believe it's called. Fantastic fixture, ton of light output, should do very well for SPS. But if you have a tank that is maybe, let's say, a cube footprint or just has a lot more space front to back, or it's a much, much bigger aquarium, like let's say a 180 or something like that, a single pendant or multiple pendants are more likely to get you the kind of light output you're looking for those footprints. So for instance, if you got like a 45 gallon cube tank, and which for those who don't know, it's about 24 inches by 24 inches by 18 inches tall, a single Radion fixture or a pendant fixture similar to is going to do a much better job of lighting that than say a strip, which means, you know, you got this thin strip in the center and front and back of the tank might not be nearly as well lit as the very center of the tank. So really that's the answer. Personally, I tend to use pendants because I tend to like tanks with a lot of footprint as opposed to just thin, long aquariums. But for those who do prefer those tanks or already have those tanks, strips work really well too. Hey, how's it going?
Good. Still a little weird here in terms of the settings, but I'm getting the hang of this.
No worries. So what we're discussing today is LED technology and essentially how you can use LED technology effectively for SPS coral specifically. And you guys are somewhat of a pioneer, I would say, in the reefing world, having come out with a lot of innovative product. And in my opinion, the first solid reef fixture that I've seen in the market years ago with the Gen 1 Radions. So when you guys took your approach to lighting corals using LEDs, how did you guys go about it? And how did you guys make all those important decisions effectively for this specific task?
Well, interestingly enough, this has become very topical lately. Largely because we're several years now into LED fixtures, particularly the Radion, and one of the things we're really starting to see is a lot of amazing reef tanks which are lit with Radion lighting, and so what we're actually in the process of doing right now is taking these success stories, and this information and making it. Our goal over the next couple of months is to make all of this information available to all hobbyists who use our fixtures. The reason why it's kind of topical is because early on, you know, when we first developed the Gen 1 Radion, what we did was we looked at what people were using, you know, to get the best results out of traditional technologies like T5 and halides. And it was fairly clear that the vast majority of people were using the same combination of bulbs for their T5 fixtures, or the same halide bulbs. Two that, you know, on the halide side, one that comes to mind is like the Phoenix 12 and 14K
Right.
bulbs, and then say ATI's blue, I think it's Reef Special or Aquarium something special, and Blue Plus are two very commonly used, you know, bulb sets. And what we did was we basically looked at the best of what was available in terms of LED diodes, and then made sure that we could dial in those particular channels to match that spectrum as closely as possible. And on the original fixture, that was what dictated a lot of the presets. So that's why, like in EcoSmart Live, or actually back then it wasn't EcoSmart Live, it was the Radion control program. You know, we had those presets in there that basically mirrored those halide color mixes, which people were using on their reef tanks.
Basically, before you were here, I was basically talking about the evolution of lighting over the years, how we started off in way back in the day with VHO fluorescent T12s and metal halides, and how back then halides didn't have a lot of options. You basically had your what was it, like 6500K metal halide, and then you were trying to use your VHOs to balance the color. And then as things progressed, we started to see more and more different variations of bluer and bluer halides to help bring in that coral growth and color spectrum into the mix. And then we started seeing T5s, which kind of battled the heat issues of the halides while giving more options for color blending and mixing. And now we've gotten to a point where LEDs are kind of doing that. You buy a fixture that might have, you know, when it's on 100%, will be somewhere in the 14,000 Kelvin spectrum. But at the end of the day, you can tune it to be whatever you want. What have you guys seen in terms of like your first Gen 1 Radion? You said you were basically picking the best LEDs available at the time. Now you've already got up to your third generation of Radion, right? And have the LEDs changed since then? Have you guys picked new LEDs, custom done ones?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at actually the specs on them, which unfortunately I don't have in front of me, but you'll see that each basically generation of LED fixture of Radion, we updated to whatever the best of breed was that was coming out of Cree and the other manufacturers in terms of spectral peak, output, performance, general quality. And that's actually something too with the LEDs we select, which there's different grades which you can purchase from a manufacturer, which are called bins. And on the Radion fixtures in particular, we always pick the top bin because you get a higher level of consistency and output from the higher the bin, the better the better the consistency from diode to diode.
Right on.
And Pat just actually walked in and joined us. So.
Sorry for being
no
late,
worries.
Guys, but love to throw in some comments here to supplement what Jay was saying in regards to your question. I mean, when LEDs came onto the market, I mean, we were going against a technology that had been existing and been, you know, kind of fine-tuned for 10 years or 15 years. And so we really just kind of threw out what we thought and what we experienced worked really well. And after 3 generations of LEDs, we've been able to fix and kind of fine-tune things. But the game really was, you know, a lot of people were trying to put more par and just really cram all the color that you can and all of the intensity that you can into a economical fixture and do that with as many options as we can. And what we're finding today is that we've got enough par.
Oh yeah.
You know, we've got plenty of par. We've got a really wide spectrum. And as opposed to a fixed T5 or halide bulb, we can fine tune these spectrums, and we gave the end user complete control to tune the spectrum or to change intensity. And what we're realizing is, well, not every color spectrum is the same in terms of the coral's response, as we know. But how do we provide the most opportunity success for our customers? And actually, that's a program that we're going to be rolling out here for aquarists. Is we're going to share with aquarists around the world the most successful programs, the most successful color spectrums and lighting times that the highest end and really the tanks that are growing the best SPS with color and growth.
So all through basically practical application from other users who have already had great success.
Exactly. And we want to share that success with people. And it's something that we haven't been able to do. When we introduced these LEDs and all the software associated with it, it really started from a point of giving the customers ultimate control. But at the end of the day, if an aquarist walks into a store, they need advice. An average Joe is not going to have an idea of how they want or think the spectrum is going to contribute to a coral's success. Do they know where their corals came from in the ocean? Probably not. Do they know what area of the world the corals came from? Probably not. But they do like, a really awesome alien eye or, purple frag, cream, sickle, what have you, is like really cool. And they wanted to color up. Yeah. So from our perspective, we're going to share with the customers on our social media, on our platforms, on our control platform, how to get that success with LEDs.
Right.
And obviously, I mean, when you're talking about something as complex as a reef tank, which everybody in this call-in is, what's his name?
That's Al.
Oh, that's Al.
That's Al.
Oh, perfect.
Right on. I don't know how he survives out of water so long. So sorry, please do continue.
But yeah, I mean, so obviously, as everyone in this call probably knows, keeping a reef tank is a whole plethora of variables which you've got to stay on top of. It's not just lighting, but at the same time, when you look at LED lighting, I mean, the complexity, or rather the ability to change it the way that you can, adds a whole other level of complication. And I think, where we're at, or what we see is we'd at least like to put in some better tools when you're given all of this control and all of this power to basically know that you have a proven spectrum and a proven program behind your aquarium, while you try to dial in your water parameters and your feeding and,
right.
Your stay on top of your water changes and everything else that's so necessary.
Right. So I'm assuming from the fact that you guys have put a lot of effort into gathering this information, putting it out there, that you guys have realized, like a lot of hobbyists have realized themselves, that it's really easy without the correct background knowledge to destroy your corals by lighting incorrectly. And that can go in either direction. Underlighting, which in most cases is much less dangerous, versus overlighting, which is some of the problems that we've seen with lower end LED fixtures from auction websites and stuff like that. I'm trying not to drop names or anything, where you've just packed high output LEDs kind of all willy-nilly to look sort of intriguing and have somewhat control into a platform that people just won't have success with, because it's not really working in their favor, so to speak. It's basically like, here's a ton of light kind of in the spectrum you're looking for, and try not to kill anything. And unfortunately, a lot of people have had nightmares or horror stories. Like, I see a lot of people posting on forums. I will definitely say it was more back in the day when LEDs were first coming out than it was now. Yeah. But a lot of people saying, I have corals that have bleached out. I've got, this specific coral is doing really poorly in this specific spot of the tank next to this other one who's doing fine. And it was because of things like poor optics or the wrong choice of optics, burning their corals. So with all those options, like with all that power comes great responsibility, so to speak. Yeah. having that information out there for your customers, which I'm so glad to hear you guys are doing. That's fantastic news. Is going to really make it easier for the average human being, the average reefer who wants to get into something complicated like SPS, to do so without the risks that they currently have, which is getting a fixture and screwing it up terribly because they didn't have the background knowledge.
And make a great point. So
yeah.
one of the things that you can almost always guarantee that you're going to have, too little light is better than too much.
Right.
You start low light, you start with the proper spectrum, and you go out and you measure your PAR, and you're going to have success by starting and building up. You see a lot of big systems that are just dumping PAR. It's got like, okay, they got 12 radions, and it's just like, unloading, and they're seeing massive growth. They didn't start, with a 30 by 30 cube, like with, a bunch of radions over it. I mean, you got to put the frags in, you got to start low and make sure the corals are happy, and then crank up the intensity to do that. I see a question here, by Bry here, and he says, are pendants better than strips? I think that also points at another good point here. The way that the light is coming down from the pendant versus a strip is very different. And so whether you're going to buy an LED that is, very tight, emission point, or one that's like a large array of LEDs, or a strip, you're going to get different types of illumination patterns within the aquarium. And so not only do you have color that matters and intensity, but you've got your spread and how that light is refracted in the aquarium. And some of this will be opinions, a Kessel LED will look very different from a Radion, that will look very different from, a strip light. That being said, when you find a balance between a point source and a very broad source, like people when they were combining metal halides and T5s, that's going to give you some of the shimmer effect that some people like, some people don't. The broad reflected light of a T5 or the diffused light of a T5 will make sure that your corals are lit from all different sides and there's less shadowing. So really a customer needs to know what their goals are, and that will help them to and just understand how the technologies work. That will help people to really make a purchasing decision.
Right. So like on the same topic with light diffusion and all that, Radion originally had its own kind of reflector going on with just a clear lens over top of it, right? And then you guys moved over to the TIR lenses. And then you guys now also have your wide angle lenses. In terms of lenses and how lenses work with LEDs, is that enough options for LED to have just like a straight, here, we're going to give you a little bit of punch versus give you a little bit of a little extra diffusion? Like, how did you guys come up with what was enough for your TIR lenses, and how wide was wide enough for the other wide angle?
There's a couple of goals and reasons why we made the transition, and I'll also answer the question of kind of what direction we're headed in the future.
Cool.
Without trying to give too much away. So when we started out with a reflector is inherently going to be less efficient at capturing all the light and then pushing it down to the aquarium or reflecting it down to the aquarium. When you're using discrete LEDs emitters, such as the Radion, there's actually a primary optic and a secondary optic. The TIR lens is the secondary optic. And when you're using a TIR, it's going to be much more efficient in getting that light down to the tank. What a reflector is very good at is making sure that there's a lot of reflections before it hits the tank. And so in doing so, the mixing of the colors is going to be very good. When you have a TIR lens, there's a lot of simulations that are done, and a lot of thought goes into the shape, geometry, and the inner dimensions of the lens. And what that will ensure is that you have good color mixing when the light is being emitted and actually hits the bottom of the aquarium. And so for us, and what you'll see between a well-designed lens, a TIR lens, versus one that's poorly designed, is color separations. You'll also see the relative dispersion of the intensities. So for the wide angle lens, we're shooting for a wider dispersion and less, hot points underneath the LED. Now the drawback for the wide angle lens is sometimes now, the light needs to be a little bit closer to the aquarium, or if you don't have a hood, you're going to be spilling light out the sides of the tank.
Right.
So, there are some, things to consider that are beyond that, just the kind of intensity below the tank. Now, in the future, I think your question is really, really on target because, we would love to give even more options. And I think that would be the future. I'm not going to go into too many details, but there's a lot of ways and there's a lot of different methods of diffusing that light or creating a more focused light. And I think in the future, what you'll see from us is more technology that will help us to achieve the desired results for aquarists in the dispersion.
Right on.
There was a question on here which actually kind of goes back to the other one, which I'll take, which is are LEDs better than metal halides or T5 high output lights? And this is a question obviously that's very topical. I think probably more so actually when LEDs first launched than now. I think the simple answer is that they're different. Different technologies, they have some different strengths and weaknesses. Interestingly enough, what we think of in terms of T5s and halides is what Pat alluded to earlier, which is actually what's been over a decade in terms of fine tuning. When we think of halides and T5s, we think of the bulbs which are now the most efficacious on the market.
Right.
Not all the ones that died along the way because they weren't effective at what they did. In terms of, from a practical standpoint, I personally am a big fan of LEDs because I don't like changing bulbs. I want to keep my power consumption as low as possible, and I like the low profile of LEDs, but then I'm biased. I've only ever really, I've done almost all of my SPS keeping under LEDs. You can see the tank in the back. In terms of downside, LED versus halide, there's not really much of a downside that you could have between an LED and a halide because they're both point light sources.
Well, I think with the Radion, an halide is going to give you more caustics or more shimmer because of its point source nature. If you're talking about just par, a halide is going to give you a ton of par, with the reflector, and it'll give you a nice dispersion as well. But you're going to have less flexibility over time.
Right.
You're going to have to change the bulb. LEDs, the spectrum does not drift. Over time,
there's no burn-in period.
You can pretty much expect to get 10 years out of the LED's effective life
versus 6 to 12 months, depending on your halide or T5 bulb. The one, and this is actually comes up to another question about what lights are those in the back, and that's where that's one area where there is an advantage. Truthfully, between a T5 and an LED fixture is you get a wider coverage area. Now, what you're getting with a wider coverage area is actually less wattage being transferred into par per square inch under the fixture. But what you are getting is a wider light source, so you get less shadowing because it's not a point light source. Which is why, for instance, on my tank, which is getting very grown in the back, I actually have 4 XR15s running at about 50%. Now, what that's achieving is you can see actually, if you look at the shadowing, or the light behind the tank, is very even lighting across the whole tank. I have them turned down comparatively quite low towards their total output, because in reality, the amount of par or wattage that I want to be putting in there is substantially less than what I could be putting in there if they were running at 100%.
Right.
But that way, as the coral grows in and you're getting areas of the tank which are going to be shadowed, which you would get with also with T5s, but not to the same extent. You know, that's basically how I've compensated for it, by having more fixtures.
Now, the XR15 does use the wide angle lens standard, so you're going to have more width coming out, and you can kind of see how it's spilling out onto the wall right there.
Right.
And right now we're using the RMS tank mount system. You can also mount these things from the ceiling and adjust the height.
So is that the recommended height that you have on there for the wide angle lenses?
Yeah, so the RMS is a standard height. The distance above the water is really going to depend upon your tank and the width of your tank and those dimensions. So it is a good 8 inches or 9 inches above, 8 inches above the tank, 9 inches above the water is our standard height. Though if we wanted to, we could basically put the regular TIR lenses and raise them up a little bit higher, but still achieve the same sort of lighting intensity within the tank.
I actually, I would have to look at it, but I actually don't think that I think those are the regular lenses.
Did you swap them out?
I don't think I swapped those for
those come with wide angles.
Oh, those come with wide angles. Okay, no, I stand corrected. That shows
Right on. Nice. LED lights hurt. Whoa, that's a good question. Do the LED lights hurt or affect the fish? I'm thinking of venturing into moon jellyfish. Do you know anything about the Cubic Orbit 20 LED aquarium?
You would probably best be served by contacting them. I think we have is that what we have here?
So I could
aquarium.
fair a guess at this answer, although I have no formal background and I am not a expert. But I would say that low intensity light is not going to hurt your jellyfish. High intensity light may or may not have negative effects. Generally, when you're using a jellyfish tank, a little bit of light is what you want just to illuminate the jellyfish so it looks like it's glowing. A lot of people will just kind of have, color changing LEDs or like a RGB that's going to kind of morph and make your jellyfish kind of suit the mood of the room or something like that. But as a general principle, fish, it's like any sort of animal or person. You don't want the light too bright. You don't want to be generally scaring your fish all the time by doing changing the colors really rapidly. A lightning storm is probably a little scary for fish. We do offer that option to the fish's benefit or detriment. I'm not sure. Definitely to people's amusement, but that happens to be the nature of the industry. Yeah. Yeah,
I would agree. I don't think the LEDs that come standard in those jellyfish creasels or jellyfish tanks are going to do anything detrimental to the jellyfish you usually get. Moon jellyfish, as far as I know, don't have any sort of photosynthetic requirements. So they're just going to float around in a circle. I've kept them. And I did have exactly what you're talking about, just a color changing LED with a remote so you can set the mood and play some Barry Manilow in the background or something.
They're mesmerizing though. I mean, there is something that just
there are a lot of it's I kind of compare it to sea monkeys, but elegant. They don't take a lot of care, but they bring something to the table that you just don't get anywhere else. The only jellyfish I know of that may or may not care about a radion are upside down jellies because they are photosynthetic.
Yeah.
So they might enjoy being under one. I don't know how much light they can handle. I personally haven't kept them, but yeah, no, that's a killer question. I didn't think we were going to get a jellyfish question today. So here's a question that, no problem. That's come up in the past that customers have asked me that I'll just pass on to you guys since you guys are also in water movement. Is there a relationship between highlight for SPS and the amount of water movement that's required?
There is definitely a relationship. So when the higher intensity light you're putting out, the faster the chemical reactions that are happening in the coral run. and they're going to be generating more oxygen in the coral's tissue. Oxygen in high levels is actually a toxicity, and that's probably one of the reasons why corals end up bleaching. Is, well, this is what I've read, is that it's because of this high oxygen content. Now, the more flow that you have, the more easily the corals are able to dissipate that high partial intensity of oxygen or partial pressure of oxygen within the coral's tissue. So by that, increasing that flow, you're able to kind of overdrive your coral's metabolic processes, and therefore achieve better growth. Now, like anything, if you're running your car on NOS, if you're really, running high-end fuel, you're teetering on the edge of possible disaster by trying to run it that way. That being said, by doing it carefully and doing it, controlled and with a methodical, method behind it, being very pragmatic about it, you can achieve, really excellent success and growth, or faster. But the question really comes to, what are your goals as an aquarist? Are you trying to grow your SPS to the surface of the tank as fast as humanly possible? Or are you trying to have your corals be healthy and enjoy them as they're growing and enjoy the experience? I guess it really depends on you as far as that goes.
That's one of the things I think too, which we'll see more of in terms of information over the coming months, because some of the people, some of the organizations and groups that we partnered with are actually educational and research facilities over the past few years, and some of the information, which their studies and whatnot, is starting to become more available, which ties in both with that and then other things such as coral spawning, and how light spectrum and intensity variation actually plays a role in that as well. And some of this stuff is less practical, potentially the coral spawning to the home hobbyist, but things like whether you're going for color or whether you're going for growth or a balance between the two is exactly the kind of thing which people might want to learn more about as it becomes more available to the hobbyist.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and I recently had the privilege to visit Jamie Craggs over at the Horniman Museum in right outside of London a couple months ago. And he's done some really amazing work with radions and simulating the coral, basically acquiring corals from the Southeast Asia, right around, I think it was Fiji, and simulating the conditions within the museum exactly to the hour that the corals were experiencing in the wild. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but what did he simulate? He simulated the lighting intensity. He simulated the lighting photo period of the day, so the start day, end day, and the increase and decrease of the solar intensity from that. He simulated the seasonal shift of solar intensity from the time of year. So in the summer versus the winter, the sun is going to be less strong in that geography. Now, when Jamie did this work, you have to pick a particular latitude and longitude to simulate. So by overlaying those intensities, plus even one more step further, because the Earth's path around the sun is elliptical, the intensity coming from the sun is varies in a parabolic nature with relation to that. So by combining all of those different factors into a graphical layout, the corals end up spawning that he was dealing with in transitional points from that variation in solar intensity. And he also overlaid on top of all this solar change, the lunar schedules as well. So basically, Jamie took it to the 10th degree and simulated nature as closely as he could possibly fathom, well, in terms of the spectrum, intensity, and photo periods. And what happened was pretty amazing, is that the corals spawned the exact same time as the corals in the wild. And, this was a broadcast feeder. This is Acropora that he got to spawn. The specific species, I'd have to check the website. But it was pretty amazing, and it was pretty landmark what they were able to accomplish. And again, they did this with radions And they did this by basically taking the spectrum that the corals were seeing out in the wild and matching everything up as closely as possible. So this is pretty interesting what we're able to do. And actually, EcoTech is working with Horniman at the moment to replicate Jamie's schedule so that a home aquarist would be able to do the same thing in their home tank. So that's a good question for you. Do you think that a aquarist out there would want to try to spawn broadcast corals in their tank?
I am going to have to go ahead and say yes, because I would want to do it.
Yeah.
I am already intrigued. Now I need to set up another reef. Thanks a lot.
So what we would love to do is, okay, you go on to EcoSmart Live and you can just click on the Horniman mode. And we're playing with the idea of making you donate to Horniman, but we haven't decided whether we would require that or not. But, to make it really simple to try this kind of thing out, and
just make sure your skimmer is on.
If you
are successful, or else you're gonna.
In reality, you should know when it would be spawning. If you're successful. I mean, I would love to have a. So part of the idea is, can we create a social experiment where we're basically crowdsourcing research? Can we create a scenario where we've got people all over the world trying an experiment to spawn the same kind of coral? I would love to work with like Cairns Marine down in Australia to get a specific acro out there and get frags or larger pieces out there, because you need enough coral mass to do this, and say, hey, buy into this. We're going to donate the money to charity. You get your frag. And, if you can successfully get the coral to spawn, we'll have you down to MACNA next year and let you tell us how you did it.
Yeah. You know what? We're game. If you guys end up going through with that, I will set up.
I'm signed up.
I'll set up a tank in this office right next to my desk, and I'll be on board with that. No problem at all. That sounds incredibly interesting. Like, there are certain things that achieving them in the home aquarium would just blow people's mind. Coral spawning is one of them. Everybody has their mind blown when they see somebody's tank spawn, and it's happened, but it's very rarely and with no real consistency. So it's usually a fluke, and it's usually not the whole tank. It's usually one specific coral or a set of specific corals. But like, there was even that one gentleman, I think he's in Australia, who successfully bred Squamosa and Maxima tridacna clams in captivity for the first time, which when I saw that, I got all giddy. My mind was blown. But
it's all about finding what are the parameters that set that off. What are the parameters? And I think for broadcast corals versus brooding corals, we need to figure out as a industry, as a hobby, as a to how to do this, because not only is it important for our hobby as to make or crossbreed corals or make designer corals, that would be cool. But also, if we're able to, reproduce these things and aquaculture and mariculture and spread species around the earth or repopulate them, I mean, ideally, that's a big possible achievement for the future.
That would be fantastic. That is something that is incredibly intriguing to be able to take it to a level of almost beyond sustainability. So we're going beyond sustaining and able to really just push corals back to where they belong, as well as have more corals in the hobby, is something that would just be mind blowing. I'm actually really intrigued that it's mostly the light period that did it, because there's all theories back in the day, discussions on forums about whether or not it was the actual gravitational pull of the moon changing things that caused corals to spawn. But if it's able to be achieved simply by mimicking, the lighting those corals are receiving in the wild to the absolute closest point possible, that's an incredible discovery in and of itself.
What Jamie was able to show actually when I was there is he took corals from different geographical locations, because that solar intensity spectrum over a course of a year varies a lot depending on geography. And so what was interesting is corals from a particular area, they would all be in different portions or different spots during the curve, but they would be reproducibly happening at the same point, and you usually be a transition point, right? something's changing in the solar spectrum, and that's what the corals use as their signal. Okay, this is a theory, but I think that a lot of corals might operate that way, but not all. So, a lot of other theories, I'm sure, still hold around.
Potentially relevant. Do you guys want to help these people who are getting into high-end lighting and trying to understand lighting for their corals understand the difference between PAR, PER, and lux?
Sure. So, in terms of PAR, so what we're measuring there is photosynthetically available radiation. And you're generally going to be looking at a spectral range between around 400 to 800 nanometers. It's the visible range of light spectra and frequency. So when you're measuring PAR, you're taking the entire width of that spectrum into consideration and coming up with a number. I forget the unit of it, but that number is basically going to signify how much light is going to be photosynthetically available for the plants, which was originally developed for, to absorb, or corals underwater. Now, underwater, it's important to know that the light does not travel through the water at the same drop off. So the deeper you are, you're going to get a different spectrum. More of the reds are going to drop off. So you got to remember, if you're keeping deep water corals, you probably shouldn't have any red in your spectrum at all. Now, PER is a little bit different. That takes into consideration the fact that the peaks for chlorophyll A and B are not all across the same range that is measured by PAR. And so it tries to, it heavily weights and only measures the blue area of the curve where it's chlorophyll A, I think, and the red area, so that you're eliminating some of that intensity of light that's not actually uptaken, it's not brought into the corals and is not involved in photosynthesis.
Right on. And that differs from lux, as basically lux is a measurement of all the light in the visible spectrum landing on a surface. So exactly. Yeah, so what I try to do for people who can't afford PAR meters, because they're not cheap, lux meters are far less expensive. And what I've recommended for some people is, if you're trying to understand where the light in the tank is falling and where your hot spots are and where the most intense parts of the tank are, if you're using a fixture you trust or a brand that has high enough PAR, and you already know that and you don't want to measure the PAR, using a lux meter to map out the highest points in the aquarium in terms of the light falling in that area is usually a decent way to figure out where you can put your highest light corals versus your lower light corals. That's really great. We actually have a question right here from YT CDN Studman. I recently switched to Radions over my 200-gallon mixed reef. Is there a download for a good program to best color and growth? I would even answer that. You guys already have a wicked one built in.
Yeah, I mean, I think our most popular mode right now is Radiant Color mode. I think that mode gives a great combination of deep blue light, as well as, peeks out on some whites and reds and greens in the middle of the day. And then there's a wonderful blue hue for the evening as well, and ends up, with some moonlight. So that's by far the most popular program, and a great one to start. I would just make sure that, if you're switching over, that you use our acclimation mode and start with a low intensity and allow that to increase over a course of 3 to 4 weeks.
Right on. He actually just responded again saying the lights turn off too early.
So you can set that when you're setting your new aquarium setup, or you go into your graph and you can modify the points of any mode. So if you're having trouble, programming it, or you're not the most savvy with the web, you can certainly call in. Our customer service guys will even log into your account remotely and help you to get the perfect graph for you.
Oh, right on. I didn't even know you guys did that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right on. You kind of answered this question, so I might as well bring it up again anyways. But what information or recommendations would you give to somebody who's switching over to LED, who's never dealt with LED before?
Well, it really depends on where you're starting. I think that if you are having success growing corals and you've got an established tank, it's very important that you don't overlight your corals with a new spectrum. I think you want to, if you can, and it's a very established tank, transition the light gradually. Maybe you have half the tank lit by LEDs or a combination thereof. With your old spectrum. But if you do switch over all at once, just start with a low intensity. We have an acclimation mode built into the light, or ESL. So you basically pick your target spectrum and then set a percentage of down, so a percentage of intensity as you want, where you want to start. So maybe your target spectrum is 100% on the blue channels, 50% on white, 23% on red, 24% on green. You set that as your target, and then acclimation mode, you set where you want the dim level to start, and then day by day, over a course of let's say 4 weeks, each day will increment and increase that lighting intensity by 2 or 3 degrees, or the difference split evenly over the course of those days. So another thing that you want to make sure to do is watch your corals. Be a studious student of your corals. Do they look happy? Are they retracting? How does the tissue look? And start, conservatively. The dimmer the better, because if the corals are hungry for light, they're going to extend their polyps. They're going to extend that. If they're getting too much light, they're going to react.
I have a couple of practical things with respect to the program. Is from the beginning, and we talked about this at the beginning, the halide presets which exist in ESL were actually matched fairly closely to the actual outputs of the halide bulbs that were most popular when we actually first launched the Radion. So if you're switching from halides, that's a good place to start if you already are using those bulbs. Simply pick the one that's similar, and as Pat said, follow it closely. The other thing that I've heard is that when switching from halides, you should run potentially a shorter photo period. If you're running a 10-hour period with halides, then run an 8-hour period with LEDs, because the output spectrum is much more targeted with the LEDs in terms of the wattage that you're putting into the tank than it is with halides.
Right.
And again, that we can't emphasize enough, when you switch, it's always better to underlight than overlight, because you can always increase the light over time, but it's much harder to repair the coral after you've damaged it.
Another idea that I don't think a lot of people have caught on to completely is that the light that you use to grow your coral, the spectrum, may not necessarily be the spectrum that you use to view your coral. And if the spectrum that is viewing, if you prefer it to be a little bit warmer, so you're seeing what would look to you to be more natural colors than a more blue spectrum, which may be the right spectrum for your deep water corals or certain other species, you can have either times of the day that you are basically reserving for viewing. Maybe you get home from work and you usually spend 30 minutes. You can program that right into your lights and right into your schedule. And by varying the intensity, you can make sure that you're not overlighting the corals for the total period of the day. So to make an addition to Jay's comment there, corals, it seems to us from our experience and from those that we interact with, that a coral can basically absorb only a certain amount of photons a day to remain in the same physical state or this physical condition. If you are adding too many photons during a particular day, generally what you'll see the corals do is start to go pastel on you. And that's an artifact of not as much zooxanthellae density within the coral. And if you think of it in terms of, well, okay, if there's more light, less zooxanthellae need to be around to accomplish the same amount of sugar creation for coral food. So it's going to be an interplay between lighting intensity and zooxanthellae density and coloration.
Right on. So, guys, I'm so glad you've had some time to jump on and speak with us. Oh, look, Chris is going to jump on again. Hold on one moment. There we go.
Hey, bud. I know you're about to wrap up. I just want to thank the guys from EcoTech. We've had a lot of fun, and really appreciate you guys getting on to the call and joining us with our first blab.
Let's have us back again, because this was a lot of fun for us too.
Oh no, we're going to do it again for sure. Anytime you guys have a product release you want to talk about, or there's a subject maybe you guys just want to bring up in general because you feel like it would benefit the hobby, I'm always here. I love talking this stuff. I'm a geek.
About this, this new templates and colors we're going to be coming out here with in the next month.
Oh, I'm excited for it.
Perfect. We'll hold you to it.
All of you guys out there that are watching and enjoying this with us, we love to have questions. The guys here are here to answer your questions and help get everybody pointed on the right track. If you guys have any suggestions for blabs for us to host in the future, even if it's with a specific vendor you want us to talk to, like EcoTech, just let us know and we'll hook all that up. This hobby only gets better the more we talk about it. And, that's what it's all about, enjoying it as a whole and making this a big, merry, happy discussion fest. So you guys have yourselves a good one, and come back. Make sure to watch next time.
Thank you very much,
guys.
Thanks.
We're just keep on tanking.
Yeah. Well, hey, Chris, you said it. You said it.
Keep on tanking, baby.
Keep on tanking.
See ya.